All right, so hello and welcome everyone to this NABCA hosted TTB, Federal Regulation of Crossover Alcohol Beverage Products webinar. I'm Maggie Barshini, Director of Communications with NABCA, and we have with us here today Janelle Christian, the Director of the Office of Outreach, and Aniko Kasprian, the Industry Education Technical Advisor in the Office of Outreach at TTB. That's a mouthful. I have a few housekeeping notes to address before the webinar begins. So attendees are in listen only mode and you can ask questions using the box with the question mark. I know platforms are different, but for me, it's on the upper right hand corner. And please use the box that is with the question mark to ask your questions and avoid using the chat box for any questions you may have. If, for whatever reason, your question is more detailed and is best verbalized, use the hand icon in the lower left corner of the control panel, and I will do my best to try and unmute you so you can ask your question verbally. If you have a question, the request is to please state your name and your business or occupation prior to asking the question. Thank you for honoring that. This webinar is being recorded and will be publicly posted on the NABCA website within 7 to 10 business days. It will be under the Policy and Research tab on the homepage of the website. The slides for this presentation can be found under the materials icon, which basically is a paper clip and what looks like a sheet of paper behind it. So you can download the handout from there. And that's also located on the upper right-hand corner. And there's only one handout, so that will be available. So if you have follow-up questions after today's webinar, you are encouraged to send them directly to Janelle and Aniko at outreach@ttb.gov. And don't panic, we will type it in the either the chat window and it's also on the slide. So you have many ways of getting that address so you can ask your questions. So I'd now like to briefly introduce our speakers. Janelle focuses on preparing educational material and coordinating and conducting outreach for TTB regulated industry members to encourage voluntary compliance with TTB laws, regulations, and requirements. Janelle joined TTB in 2011 as a Presidential Management Fellow and holds a law degree from the University of Oregon and a Master of Public Administration from Columbia University. Before joining the outreach team, Aniko worked as a Special Operations Investigator in TTB's Office of Special Operations, where she spent 4 years working Federal Alcohol Administration Act trade practice cases. She also spent 6 years as an investigator in the Western 2 District, primarily focusing on wine and tobacco. Her other government services include the United States Air Force, and she was a special agent for the Department of Homeland Security. Her primary area of expertise is in the alcohol industry with a particular focus on wine. So with all that said, ladies, the platform is now yours.
Thank you so much, Maggie, and thank you for having us. It's always a treat when we get to present at NABCA. And this one is fun that it's a webinar. So Aniko and I are going to both be presenting in this presentation. And as Maggie just gave you a preview of in our bios, I'm sort of more of the book and regulatory piece of it. And Aniko has all of the expertise. So I think we'll make a really good team and hopefully we'll be able to address all of your curiosities and questions related to crossover beverages. So usually I would start with our disclaimer slide, but today I'm just going to do it verbally. If Aniko and I do say something now, it might become obsolete or outdated in the future. So if you are watching this at a later date, please consult the regs. That is is what will supersede anything that we tell you today. Also, we're humans, so if we do say something incorrectly, again, you really want to rely on and consult the regs. If you do need a written opinion on something from TTB, you can just shoot us your request at that email address, outreach@ttb.gov. So, just very briefly, our agenda for today's programming, we will start off with the federal authority of crossover beverages and how the tools in our tool belt, if you will, of how we regulate them, some definitions for you, and then we'll go into how we can regulate them both pre-market with our formulas and formulas and labeling review, and then post-market, which is our advertising and trade practices. And then we'll follow it up with some questions at the end if you have any. And then also, I'll give a couple of updates of what's going on, some kind of hot topics with TTB. So just starting with our mission. So when you think about TTB, why are we regulating crossover beverages? So with our mission as a tax collection agency, the first and primary, I would say, portion of our mission is to collect taxes. So we do that not only on alcohol, but also tobacco, firearms, and ammunition. And then we protect the consumer by ensuring the integrity of alcohol products. We ensure that only qualified businesses enter the alcohol and tobacco industries. And then we prevent unfair and unlawful market activity for alcohol and tobacco products. So, in looking at our mission, it's the protect and the prevent. Those are really the two areas of our mission that relate with what we're going to talk about today. So, protect the consumer is really looking at the labeling of the products, making sure that what you're purchasing is what you think it is that you're purchasing, which I think is a really important component of these crossover beverages. And then preventing unlawful market activity, which is really the trade practices aspect of it, which Aniko is going to spend a fair amount of time talking about. So stepping back just a bit, so crossover beverages, what is it that we're talking about? It's a hot topic today and in general. And you can kind of think of it just as if there is a brand with brand awareness and they are leveraging that brand awareness to then jump into the alcohol arena. So primarily we're talking about non-alcoholic beverages, then turning into becoming an alcohol beverage, producing things in the alcohol beverage space. So TTB has two primary statutes that we operate under, that we carry out. So the first is the Internal Revenue Code, and our sort of in-house informal way of referring to this is our collect the revenue statute. So the elements of the Internal Revenue Code are really related to tax collection. So you can see on here that there's qualification of your bonded premises, there's production requirements, formulas, record keeping taxes, and just very basic labeling. But in thinking about the things that we can do in the crossover beverage space that you would be interested in, and really making sure that everybody knows what they're buying, making sure that kids aren't buying these products, formulas is really the only tool in our tool belt under the Internal Revenue Code. And an important thing to note here is that the Internal Revenue Code, or the IRC, it applies to all alcohol beverage products with 0.5% or greater alcohol by volume. It doesn't matter if it's sold in interstate commerce. It doesn't matter what type of alcohol it is. The Internal Revenue Code will apply to all alcohol beverage products. The other statute that we operate under is the Federal Alcohol Administration Act. So you can see a giant circle on this one because really all of the pieces of this are tools that we have for regulating these products. And the reason is that this is what we call our Protect the Public statute. It was designed by Congress to after the end of Prohibition, when the nation started selling alcohol products again, they really wanted to set up a regulatory framework that would keep the public safe. So we have labeling authority, label pre-approval, the qualification of your premises, giving the permits, advertising, trade practices, and then labeling proceedings. So all of those really are tools that we have for regulating these products. What's important to note about the FAA Act is that it does not apply to all products. So it does need to be sold in interstate commerce or imported. And it only applies to wines that are 7% alcohol by volume or greater. And it only applies to malt beverages that are malt beverages under the definition, which I'll go over, not beer, um, or not all beers, I should say. And then it does apply to all distilled spirits. But again, that's only if they're sold in interstate commerce. So, what are we talking about? Crossover products. So TTB doesn't define crossover products. So it's a relatively recent trend that we're seeing, and they are not in the regulations. We also don't have definitions for a lot of the other terms that you would see on these products. So RTD, hard, spiked, can cocktail, none of those are defined by TTB definitions. So, how do we define them? They are either going to be a beer, a malt beverage, a wine, or a distilled spirit, just like any other product. And so it depends on how they're made, and how they're made and what they are will then dictate whether or not both statutes apply to them, and particularly whether the FAA Act applies to them. So let's just start with those definitions. So beer is an Internal Revenue Code definition. So beer, because it's Internal Revenue Code, it is going to apply to all products 0.5% or greater that fit this definition. So it's a fermented beverage containing 0.5% or more alcohol by volume. And this is the critical piece here, that it's brewed or produced from malt, wholly or in part, or for a substitute for malt. And you're going to see that's the distinction that we're going to talk about. So a substitute for malt could be rice, grain of any kind, bran, glucose, sugar, and molasses. So again, that is beer. When TTB talks about beer, that's what we're talking about. And we will contrast that with malt beverage. So malt beverage is an FAA Act definition. So it has to meet this definition to be regulated under the FAA Act and all of those things that we talked about, the labeling, the trade practices, the certificates of label approval. You have to meet this definition the product does in order to be regulated as such. So the key distinction here is that it has to be with malted barley with hops. So it has to have both malted barley and hops in order to be an FAA Act product. Wine is a little more straightforward. So under the FAA Act, essentially, it relies on the Internal Revenue Code definition of wine, but it also says that it can be made in the manner of wine. And it cannot be less than 7% alcohol by volume. So again, if it's going to be regulated under the FAA Act, wine has to be at least 7% alcohol by volume and not more than 24. And then the Internal Revenue Code just says there's no minimum. So again, that 0.5% and then up to 24%. Distilled spirits, the easiest one yet. If it's a distilled spirit, it's a distilled spirit. It doesn't matter the alcohol content. It could be 0.5%. It could be 25, 50%. So again, that will be, distilled spirits are always regulated under both the FAA Act and the Internal Revenue Code if they are sold in interstate commerce. All right, so let's jump into our pre-market approval. So what can we do with these products to ensure that you're purchasing what it is that you think you're purchasing before they get into the marketplace? So the reason I have the org chart here is because the Alcohol Labeling and Formulation Division is the division that regulates these activities by and large. So if you want to take note of this, and again, the slides are in the handout, the paper with the paper clip, and it's a PDF, and these should be hot links that work for you. So you can use this as a tool. We want you to refer to this later, but that's how you would contact anybody in the Alcohol Labeling and Formulation Division. So first, formulas. So generally, formulas are required when adding coloring or flavoring materials. Something to note is, for example, adding carbonation, excuse me, to any distilled spirit requires formula approval. So if you're adding carbonation, you do need formula approval. And the reason I cite that is because a lot of those, the canned cocktails now, a lot of the crossover beverages do contain carbonation. So those do have formula approval that we have looked at the formula, we've approved it, and that happens prior to labeling. So that formula needs to be it needs to be obtained by TTB before the product is produced or imported and prior to label approval. And the reason that formulas really, I think, or an example of a reason that formulas relates to crossover beverages, for example, if a brand is known for having energy drinks, maybe they have very carbon or very caffeinated drinks. So we look at that formula and we will verify that there is not added caffeine, which is not allowed. Beverages can have naturally occurring caffeine in ingredients that are in the beverage, but they wouldn't be able to produce an energy drink in the same manner of caffeination if it is going to be an alcohol beverage. But the bigger tool that we have for regulating these is with our label pre-approval. So TTB regulations outline what must be on the label. That's all of that mandatory labeling information. There are requirements for where it goes on the label, what may be on the label if certain rules are followed. So that would be things like organic statements or vintage dates. And then what may not be on the label. So there are things that cannot be on the label, completely misleading health claims and such. So, products that don't fit into one of our standards of identity, which are published in the regulations, must be labeled with a truthful and adequate statement of composition. And you'll find that in these types of products, most of them do have a statement of composition because it's not a straightforward malt beverage or wine. So you'll see on there, and I'll give you some examples of what those statements of composition look like so you know what it is that you're purchasing. So generally, if the product is in interstate commerce, you'll need to get, or there will need to be a certificate of label approval before bottling or canning the product. And again, that's going to be only for those products that fit the definitions under the FAA Act. So when we get these labels in, what do we look at? Well, we look at them in the totality of the label. So we look at things like, does it have all of the mandatory information, including the health warning statement? And is it the proper size with proper punctuation? Does it contain any prohibited information? Is it misleading as to its contents or origin? And is it clearly labeled as an alcohol beverage product? And I know with these products, that's something that's a particular concern, right? We don't want people getting confused as to what they're purchasing. If they're in the refrigerated section of the grocery store, you want to know that you're getting that you are intentionally purchasing the hard version of it, the version with alcohol. And you don't want to be trying to buy the version without alcohol and inadvertently buy it with alcohol. So they really need to be clearly labeled. Also, I'll note that TTB won't necessarily, we won't reject a label just because it could be appealing to minors, but we will reject a label or return it for correction if it is misleading as to its contents or to the fact that it's an alcohol beverage product. So there is just a little bit of a distinction there. So a couple of examples, which I think are always fun. So first up, we have a Sunny D Tangy Original Vodka Seltzer. So we have on this one, we have all of the mandatory information. We have our brand name of Sunny D. We have a fanciful name of vodka seltzer, but it's clearly marked. It has 4.5% alcohol by volume. And then at the top, it's not required, but they've opted to say contains alcohol. So just an added sort of safeguard there. And then on the side, it does say no sales under 21. So that's smaller font, but that's there as well. And then you know what you're buying because it says vodka with real fruit juice, sparkling water, natural orange flavor, and other natural flavors. So that's that statement of composition that I mentioned. All right, let's look at another one. Lipton hard iced tea. Again, so we have our brand name of Lipton. Hard iced tea would be the fanciful name. This one says 21 plus, contains alcohol pretty prominently on the front. And then that word hard that I mentioned earlier. So again, we don't define hard, but it's generally understood by consumers that it does mean that it contains alcohol. But again, we don't regulate that word. And then it does have 5% alcohol by volume up at the top. And then over on the side, in the up and down font is where it has its statement of composition, malt beverage with natural flavors. So you know that because it says malt beverage, it is a malt beverage under the FAA Act. So it was produced with both malted barley and hops. And then finally, we have Dunkin' Spiced Original Iced Coffee. So again, spiked, that's one of those words that we don't define, but consumers generally understand it to mean that it has alcohol in it. And then this one, again, prominently it says 21 plus, contains alcohol. It's got its alcohol content up there on the top that you can see from any angle of the can. And then this one, again, the statement of composition is on the side, premium malt beverage with real coffee, natural flavor, and artificial color. So I will now turn it over to Aniko to talk about some really big tools that we have in our tool belt, the post-market tools. So take it away, Aniko.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I looked at the list. I know a few of you, so definitely send us a message if you have questions later. All right, let's move to the next slide. So we're going to talk about advertising and trade practice, and this falls under the Trade Investigation Division and the Market Compliance Group. The Market Compliance Group has an advertising section and a team that works primarily on advertising. We also have me, who works on trade practices. So what we do is they ensure and promote industry compliance with the laws and regulations that we administer. And we also do education. We have 4 districts now. We've realigned. We used to have 6, and now we have 4. So what we do is we ensure that only qualified applicants are granted permits. And we investigate all allegations of trade practice in the marketplace. We also examine COLAs to deter unauthorized usage, and we have investigators throughout the nation, as well as auditors. We prevent misleading labeling and advertising of alcohol beverages. That is where our advertising reviews come in, and we have people looking at labels. We have people sending us in labels because they might have a complaint or a concern about it. We ensure public safety by responding to credible information that there is some type of health-related contamination or some type of adulteration of a product. So we're talking here like recalls or someone got sick. We have a consumer complaint team that deals with all of those types of tips and complaints. We also, here's our new chart. So we are separated into 4 districts now. So we have the Northwest, we have the Southwest, the Northeast, and the Southeast now. And we have 4 district directors. And currently we have about approximately 50 investigators across the country. There are several types of TTB investigations. I have done all of these. We have an application investigation, and this is an investigation that occurs right when you submit your application. So it has not been approved yet, but something on your application prompts us to do an application investigation. This could be done over the phone, or it could be that we go out to the proposed premises location. And this is usually something having to do with maybe a background that didn't come back, something about your description of premises, or something having to do with the application status. We also have a post-application investigation. This means that you have been approved, You have your you have your permit. It's usually done within a year of getting your permit, and this is when we come out just to make sure that everything's going smoothly. This could be done randomly, or it could be done because we haven't seen anything from you. You haven't submitted any POAs, you didn't submit any report of operations, or we don't see an excise tax return within that 4th year. So we're kind of coming out there to see how you're doing, if you need help, and see where you're going in the process of producing or whatever it is that you're doing with that application. Then we have our bigger investigations. This is our product integrity investigation and our revenue investigation. These can be done separately or they can be done jointly. Usually if we're having a product integrity investigation, that is usually a investigation where we're going to look into the process and the production of what you're making. We're going to go and we're going to do a site visit. We're going to look at all your records. We're going to look at your documentation, like your permit, your description of premises, things like that. And we're going to make sure that the processing and the production is good. On a revenue investigation, we're going to be looking at your reports of operations, we're going to be looking at your inventory, and we're going to be looking at your excise tax return, as well as your production, what you have in bond, and what you've removed tax paid. Like I said, these can be separate, but they can also be joint. So you could have a product integrity investigation and a revenue investigation at the same time. We also have an operating without a permit investigation, and this could be that you didn't even know you're getting an operating without a permit investigation because something about your permit may have lapsed. Like there are certain things that you need to tell us within 30 days or you technically do not have a permit. So this could be a change in proprietorship, a change in control or ownership, a change in location. We've had cases where people have moved from Bay A to Bay D and they did not tell us, and they've been operating in Bay D for 3 years. We go out, technically that is an operating without a permit investigation, and potentially you can be charged the full tax rate for any product that you removed within those 3 years that you technically did not have a permit. So there are certain things that you need to make sure that you advise TTB about that change within 30 days. If you have questions about that, you can email me. You can email us at outreach@ttb.gov. Our last type of investigation is a trade practice investigation. We have a team of 8 investigators who are part of the Office of Special Operations team. As I mentioned in the beginning, or we mentioned in the beginning, I was on that team for 4.5 years. This is where we investigate allegations of potential trade practices. So we're talking about tied house, exclusive outlet, commercial bribery, and consignment sales. So under field operations is the market compliance office. This office ensures that industry compliance in the marketplace through addressing concerns like consumer complaints, that trade practice complaints, product recalls, advertising reviews. So this is a team that does all of this, and we all specialize in one thing. So I am the trade practice program manager. And then we also have a recalls program manager, a consumer complaint specialist, and you can reach us at that number or at those 2 email addresses below. Advertising. So we're just talking about FAA Act products that Janelle mentioned earlier. So we review advertising materials on websites and all social media accounts. We even look at, if you use influencers, we will look at their accounts to see if you have liked or tagged or shared those. So we will look at that as well. We look at any point of sales materials for violations. So this is stuff such as your sales pamphlets, your posters, any type of promotional displays, or any type of written, printed, or graphic materials that you may have in stock. So if you have an investigation, the investigator will go to your premises and we will collect everything that you have there as a type of marketing, and we will look at all of the social medias that you may have. We also do look at things like Google reviews, Reddit, YouTube, things like that. So we do a pretty thorough advertising review. We can also ask the Market Compliance Office to do a further review for us as well. Again, advertising. Some of the common issues that we find with crossover products are false and misleading health claims, that the advertising is not consistent with the approved COLA, and a big one, use of prohibited statements. So remember, you can't say anything like this product won't give you a headache, or anything that is not truthful and accurate. Again, TTB monitors the advertising of these FAA beverages through a combination of referrals, complaints about specific beverages or advertisements, industry members' requests for advertising, such as a pre-clearance, so you can send that into the MCO office and they can do that for you. Or we have internal selections of advertisements for review that are just done randomly or through a program that we may be doing, or they may get in a review from an investigator, as I spoke about before. Trade practices. The purpose is to prevent wholesaler, importer, and producer control over the retailer, and accompany corruption and overconsumption. So this all started with after Prohibition, well, pre-Prohibition and after Prohibition. So we want to help keep an even playing field amongst the industry members, and we want to make sure that no industry member, so that's wholesaler, importer, or producer, has control over the retailer. Next slide. So trade practice overview. So there are 4 trade practices, and these are all defined under 27 USC 205 A through D. So we have exclusive outlet, tied house, commercial bribery, and consignment sales, and we'll go over each of these. So first, I think we need to talk about jurisdiction. So we need to have interstate or foreign commerce in order to have a violation. You can have an inducement all day. You can have a contract all day. You can have one part or one element of a violation, but you don't have a full violation until you meet all of the elements to have a violation of one of these trade practice cases. So one of the elements is you need interstate or foreign commerce. So you need to satisfy the primary clause. So there are 3 clauses, okay? So the excluded competitors' products must be sold or offered in interstate or foreign commerce, and one of the following. So you have 1, the inducement requirement or offer is made in the course of interstate commerce. This clause is usually satisfied whenever the product crosses state lines. It can also be satisfied if money crosses the state lines. It usually is always satisfied. So you usually, if you have a product that is offered in interstate or foreign commerce, you usually are going to satisfy both the primary and one of the other clauses. The other 2, if we don't have those, we can apply number 2, which applies if a purchase engages in the practices to such an extent as to substantially restrain or prevent transactions in interstate or foreign commerce, okay? Or it applies in the direct effect of such requirement to prevent, deter, hinder, or restrict other persons for selling and offering such products in interstate commerce. Most of the time, we're going to complete this clause by clause 1. And I know this is a lot of information. I'm going to go over it really quickly, and it's a lot to retain. So if you have further questions, you can email me. We need to talk about the penultimate clause. This has to do with malt beverages, and this is similar state law. So in the cases of malt beverages, trade practice provisions apply to transactions between a retailer or a trade buyer. So a trade buyer can be a wholesaler or a retailer in any state, and an industry member outside such state only if the retailer's or trade buyer's state law imposes a similar requirement for in-state transaction. So what you have to remember, this is only for malt beverages, and the law only has to be similar. It does not mean exact. It doesn't even need it to be related to alcohol. I had one that was a business commerce clause that we used that was similar, so we satisfied the penultimate clause using a business clause. Trade practice terms that you should know. Industry member. This is anyone who produces, distributes, or imports alcohol beverages. This could also include a bottler or a warehouseman, and they must have a permit. A wholesaler. This is any person who sells alcohol beverages at wholesalers to retailers, and they must have a TTB permit. Importer. Anyone who imports alcohol beverages into the United States, again, has to have a permit. A retailer, anyone who sells alcohol beverages to consumers. Again, they don't have to have a permit. They should be registered with us, but a lot of people don't realize that they have to register with us under Part 31 of the regulations. We also talk about a trade buyer a lot in trade practices, and this could either be a retailer or a wholesaler of alcohol beverages. And remember, trade buyer, because we're going to talk about that a little later on when we talk about two of the trade practice provisions. Exclusion. Again, remember how I was talking about the elements you need in order to have a violation. One of those elements is it has to meet the Interstate Commerce Clause. The other one is exclusion. So this is really important and it's really hard to prove. Exclusion is an element of proof in exclusive outlet, tied house, and commercial bribery cases. You do not need exclusion for consignment sales. Okay, that's very important to know. To prove a violation, TTB must show that the prohibited practice resulted in the exclusion of competing products. So there are two elements to exclusion. The practice places or has the potential to place a retailer's independence at risk by a means of a link or a tie between the industry member and the retailer, or by any other means of industry member control. For example, this could be that the industry member has a percentage share of ownership in one of the retail establishments. So that would create that link or tie that I'm talking about. But it's only a percentage. It can't be 100% because that would not be considered a link or a tie. It wouldn't be considered an inducement, which we'll talk about in tied house, because they own 100% of that retail establishment. So you can't induce yourself. But we will talk about that when we talk about tied house. Two, the second element, the practice results in the retailer purchasing less of a competitor's product than it otherwise would have. So because of this link or a tie, they are now not buying Nikki's vodka, they're only buying Janelle's vodka when they used to buy Nikki's vodka. So that would be what part two of that exclusion clause means. So let's talk about exclusive outlet. The most important thing that distinguishes exclusive outlet and tied house is wording. A lot of people say, how is this different than tied house? Exclusive outlet is different because it is unlawful for an industry member, we talked about that, to directly or indirectly require, that's a very important word, require a retailer by agreement or otherwise to purchase alcohol from that industry member to the exclusion of alcohol sold or offered for sale in interstate commerce. So it's all three right there. You have the violation if you meet all three. So in order to meet exclusive outlet, you have had to require the retailer to purchase your products. So this could be done in a verbal agreement, a written agreement, a contract, a beverage mandate, a beverage deck. There are many ways to require by agreement or otherwise, okay? This is where it becomes an exclusive outlet. Remember, this is only between an industry member and a retailer. So you cannot have an exclusive outlet case between an industry member who's a producer importer and a wholesaler. Can't happen. It has to be between a producer, importer, and a retailer. And then we have the other clause. There has to be exclusion, and there has to be interstate or foreign commerce. Next slide. So again, we've already kind of talked about this. This is a requirement to purchase. Again, this could be your contracts, your verbal agreements, and we do very in-depth, years-long investigations to nail these down. But with exclusive outlet, this can also be through coercion, through acts of threats of physical or economic harm. We had a case where someone threatened physical violence against a retailer unless they brought their product. You would think that doesn't happen, but it does. Next slide. Practices with exclusion. Okay, so examples of practices that result in exclusion and meet that requirement for exclusion. So purchases of alcohol beverages by a retailer and as a result, directly or indirectly, of a threat or physical or economic harm by an industry member. A contract between an industry member and a retailer, which requires the retailer to purchase alcohol beverages from that industry member and expressly restricts the retailers from purchasing in whole or part such products from another industry member. So with this, I'll give you an example. If you have a beverage mandate and last year you were going to have Janelle's vodka was on that beverage mandate, but this year Nikki's vodka is on that beverage mandate, and you have now crossed out Janelle's, said no longer buy Janelle's vodka, only buy Nikki's vodka this year, that would satisfy this exclusion clause. Okay, and note that 27 CFR 8.52 is different in that the practices above result in exclusion. So you don't have a requirement to establish a loss by the competitor. So if there is a retailer threat of either physical or economic harm, or if there is a contract that shows you can't buy Janelle's product anymore, you have to buy Aniko's, you don't have to prove loss of sales from Janelle's old product. If I don't have a contract, or if there wasn't a threat of physical or economic harm, then I have to prove that they bought less of Janelle's product because now they're buying mine. So I would do something called an exclusion spreadsheet where I would show sales from 2024 and 2023 and sales from 2025, and 2025 should show Janelle's products falling. So I would need to have that in order to prove this exclusion. Next slide. Again, criteria for determining retail independence. So this is practices that have the potential to be exclusive outlet violations. Again, like I said, that exclusion workbook. So we need a sales analysis. Okay, so we need to make sure that we are proving that this places the retailer at risk. A practice need not meet all the criteria to place the retailer's independence at risk. It only would have to meet possibly one. Next slide. So criteria for determining retailer independence. So one, the practice restricts or hampers the free economic choice of the retailer to decide which products they want to purchase or how much of that product, okay? The industry member is obligating the retailer to participate in some kind of promotion in order to obtain industry members' other products. This is really popular. So you have to buy this dog that doesn't sell well in order to get the better product. Okay, but just because you have that, I have so many people saying, oh, they made me buy this so I can get the better products because I'm in this points program. Okay, that could possibly be one part of this violation, but remember, you still have to satisfy all the other parts in order to have a violation. The retailer has a continuing obligation to purchase or otherwise promote that industry member's product. So this might be a beverage mandate that is in place for a year or possibly 2 years. So this is that continuing obligation. Next slide. Again, the retailer has a commitment not to terminate its relationship with the industry member with respect to the purchase of the industry member's products. So this is where the beverage manager has no choice but to purchase this product because it's on a beverage deck or a beverage mandate or a banquet deck, so they can't purchase what they would like to purchase. They have to purchase what's in that contract or deck or mandate. The practice involves the industry member in the day-to-day operations of the retailer. Okay, so for example, this is when the industry member has control over the retail's decision about what to purchase. Lastly, the practice is discriminatory in that it's not offered to all retailers in the local market on the same terms without business reasons present to justify the difference in treatment. Next slide. Tied house. So again, this is going to be confusing, but think about the wording. It is unlawful for an industry member, okay, so that is a producer, importer, wholesaler, to induce. So no longer requirement, it's to induce, directly or indirectly, a retailer to purchase alcohol beverages from that industry member to the exclusion of alcohol beverages offered for sale by other people in interstate commerce. So again, this is between the industry member and the retailer. It can't be between an industry member and a wholesaler. So the inducement is the key. There are 7 means to induce. By acquiring or holding any interest in a license with respect to the premises of the retailer. Remember, we spoke about this earlier. 100% is okay. Anything less than that is considered an inducement. You can have an inducement, but you need the other 2 clauses to have the violation. So these are all the inducements. By acquiring any interest in the real or personal property owned, occupied, or used by the retailers to conduct business. It's okay if you own 100% of that building because you cannot induce yourself. 3, this is a big one. By furnishing, giving, renting, lending, or selling to the retailer any equipment, fixtures, signs, supplies, money, services, or any other things of value, which we will talk about soon, subject to the exceptions contained in subpart D. Okay. 4, by paying or crediting the retailer for any advertising, display, or distribution services. This is where slotting allowances come in, is number 4. 5, by guaranteeing any loan or the repayment of any financial obligation of the retailer. 6, by extending the retailer credit for a period of more than the credit period usual and customary of 30 days to the industry member for the class of transactions. Don't get number 6 confused with consignment sales. There are 2 different, one's tied house, one's consignment sales, but they sound a little bit the same. If you have questions about that, you can email me. 7, by requiring the retailer to take and dispose of a certain quota of any such product. That is that tie-in sale we were talking about, that you have to buy this in order to get this. Next slide. Practices which put the retailer independence at risk. Okay, so this is the act by an industry member of resetting stock on a retailer's premises. You can reset your own stock, okay, but you cannot restock others. And then make sure other than stock offered by sale from that industry members. The act of an industry member purchasing or renting display, shelf, storage, or warehouse space. Again, we're talking about slotting allowances here. Ownership by an industry member of less than 100% interest in the retailer, where such ownership is used to influence the purchases of that retailer. Remember, 100% is okay. The act by an industry member of requiring a retailer to purchase one alcohol beverage product to be allowed to purchase another at the same time. That is that tie-in sale and that link. Next slide.
Aniko, so I
Yes.
know that through conferences and talking with industry members, the concern over slotting fees tends to be the one that comes up the most with crossover beverages. So just to recap, if they are paying for a slotting allowance, a slotting fee, what other elements would you need to prove for a trade practice case?
Okay, so for example, you have Coke and Pepsi. We all know you go to a grocery store or a establishment, they're either going to have Coke or Pepsi. I'm going to immediately look to see, okay, if they have Coke on the thing, I know they're probably going to be selling Topo Chico, Simply Spiced, or some type of Jack and Coke RTD. I'm going to look at that and I'm going to see, and then I'm going to see, oh, this is probably some type of slotting fee, because they're paying to play. All right. But that's not enough. I'm going to have to make sure I meet that interstate commerce clause, which I most likely will, because that we know that product is sold in interstate commerce. We know the money has probably crossed state lines, but now we have to prove exclusion. So what we're going to do is we're going to see who was on before. Who was on before Topo Chico? Who was on before Simply Spiked Lemonade? Who was on before Jack and Coke? So I'm going to start doing an investigation, and I'm going to start looking through their sales history and their bank records. I'm going to start looking who was before. Was it Pepsi products? Was it Hard Mountain Dew? Was it Lipton Hard Iced Tea? And then I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to talk to them, and they're going to say, yeah, one day they just said, you know what, we're not going to buy your products anymore. We're going to go with this. So then I'm going to start looking at contracts or emails or talking to people and find out what happened. Why was the change made? And then I'm going to go ask Pepsi, and I'm just using them as an example. Okay. I'm going to go say, when did you see your sales drop? And then I'm going to ask them for sales invoices for that particular retailer. And then I'm going to do that exclusion chart that I told you and show that all of a sudden Pepsi dropped and Coke went in, and here was the date, and here's that email or that contract or that beverage mandate, and all of it is going to come together to create a violation. Does that answer your question, Janelle?
That was an excellent answer. Yes, and I'll just reiterate, those were only hypotheticals. We only use
Totally.
names
Oh, yeah.
to illustrate the examples. We look at all products equally and all brand owners equally. We love them all. So
Next slide. Okay, so remember I told you we were going to talk about those exceptions. There are exceptions, and these are called subpart D sections. And the ones in red, these have a record keeping requirement. So again, we talked about the retailer, we talked about them having to register under Part 31, which a lot of them don't, but they are required to keep records of the items in red. And if they don't, when I'm on an investigation, I can use this as leverage to get them to potentially talk to me, because I will go to the retailer and ask them, do you have your subpart D exceptions record keeping requirements, and are you registered with TTB under Part 31? 9 out of 10, they don't have them, and a lot of them don't keep great records. So let's talk about those exceptions. Number one is product displays. These cannot exceed $300 per brand at each retailer establishment. Okay. Number two, points of sale advertising materials. So this is your coasters, your posters, your glasses with a logo, your electric signs. Although be careful with those electric neon signs, because those are worth thousands of dollars. So they are not $300. They are not an acceptable amount to us. We could potentially see that as an inducement. Okay. Temporary retailers. This is a fun one. Furbishing things of value to temporary retailers do not constitute a means to its use. They cannot be engaged in business as a retailer for more than 4 consecutive days per event, and not more than 5 events per calendar year. I don't know how many times I get that at this music festival, they were doing this and they were selling that. This is where this number 3 subpart D exception comes in. Again, no more than 4 consecutive days. So you'll see all of these golf tournaments, all of these Coachillas or whatever festivals it might be, and I'm only using that as an example. They usually stay below that, and I don't know if this is the reason for it or not, but they're usually below that, and they usually don't have more than 5 events per year. 4, equipment and supplies. Selling equipment and supplies to a retailer is okay as long as it's at the price paid and the money is collected within the 30 days. If it's outside that 30 days, then that would constitute that loan that we were talking about in those 7 means to induce. You cannot pay to install the equipment, but you can service it, but at the cost that it would cost to service that product. So think about this: coolers, tap handles, any other type of fancy display or anything at a bar. Think of that like a bar cart or something like that. We're talking about that there. Samples. Furnishing or giving samples of alcohol products is for free is okay, as long as they haven't purchased the brand within the last 12 months. Okay, so that is important. Many people violate this because of that 12-month thing. Sample amounts are limited as well. You can't just go in and do a card swipe and say, okay, do all the samples you want all day, and then on top of that, I'm going to leave $1,000 tip. So you've got a lot of problems going on there. 6, combination packaging, combining alcohol products with other non-alcohol products. So this is big in crossover products because a lot of the companies that sell non-alcoholic products are now into the alcohol product business. So this is part of this subpart D exception, when you're packaging a whole deal of non-bev or non-alc and alc. Next slide. Again, educational seminars, this is okay to give or sponsor for employees of retailers. Okay, this is important. Employees of retailers, you can't invite the public. Consumer tasting, the industry members can give consumer samples at the retail establishment, but it must be at the ordinary price if purchased from the retailer. Consumer promotions, furnishing coupons to consumers is okay. Coupons is a big mess. It has to go to the consumer. Okay, the consumer had to buy it from that retail location. The retailer can then ask the industry member for the money back. We have a lot of problems with coupons. If you have more questions about coupons, please email me. Advertising services, listing 2 or more unaffiliated retailers in an advertisement is okay. So you can't say, Nikki's Vodka, I'm going to be at this brewery and advertise that just one brewery, you can buy my product here. That is a violation. That is not an exception. You have to list 2 or more names and addresses of places that sell your products. And they can't be related. So it can't be owned. It can't be that the retail establishment is owned by the same person or the same entity. All right. Sticking and rotation and pricing services, okay to move your own product, but no one else's. So we're talking category management captains here. Okay. You may give them a plan, but you can't do it yourself. So the industry member cannot do it. There are several cases where you have an industry member working at the retail location or working at what is considered an on-premise retail location. So it could be country clubs, it can be hotel bars, it can be restaurant chains. So we do look at that. Merchandise, it's okay to sell other merchandise from other businesses. Outside signs, this was those neon signs I was talking about. You know, be careful because they can't exceed $400. Right, next slide, Janelle. Commercial bribery. All right, it is unlawful for an industry member to induce a trade buyer. Remember, I told you to remember that trade buyer thing. So now all the other ones, Tide House exclusive outlet, had to be between an industry member and a retailer. Commercial bribery can be between an industry member and a trade buyer, which means it could be between a producer and the wholesaler, or the producer and the retailer, or the wholesaler and the retailer. Okay, so it is unlawful for an industry member. Oh, can we go back one? Sorry. It's unlawful for an industry member to induce, okay, remember that word, induce a trade buyer to purchase alcohol from the industry member to the exclusion of those sold by others. So either by commercial bribery, offering or giving any bonuses, premium, or compensation to the employees, officers, or representatives of the trade buyer. So this can be knowingly or in secret. So say the owner didn't know, and the industry member is bribing the bartender, or they're bribing the beverage manager. The owner might not know. It is still a commercial bribery violation. Next slide. Okay, this means the practice of sellers paying money or making gifts to the employees or agents to induce them to promote purchases of their employers from the sellers, offering those secret inducements that I just talked about. Things of value given to officers, employees, or representatives of trade buyers that promote sales of industry members' products can indirectly induce the trade buyer to purchase more of those products. So this is like giving Rolex watches. This is giving free trips. This is giving gift cards is a big one. So just be very careful with those. Industry members may give things of value to wholesaler entities unless wholesaler is a mere conduit to its employees. So this is where, so that trip would be an example of this. If the industry member is giving a trip, okay, to the wholesaler, and then that wholesaler takes a bunch of employees on this trip, that would be a commercial bribery violation because it's a conduit, okay, to the employees. Next slide.
And I'm just going to jump in to ask Maggie. Maggie, I see that we're at time. We're just so excited about the
Oh,
topic.
sorry. I know it's so hard with trade practice because it's so long. I try to go fast, but still having you guys really understand the crux of it. Can we just move to consignment sales real quick, Maggie, so we can finish all four?
I would say yes, because I think what you have is important. And for those that need to leave, they are. And this webinar again is being recorded. So, and I think we're close to the end. So those that are here, if you can please hang on, maybe in 5 minutes we will be complete. Thank you.
Super, thank you.
Again, you have to put it at risk. We could skip this. I've already kind of talked about it. I've talked about what puts the trade buyers independent at risk. Consignment sales. Okay. This is the one that does not need exclusion. Okay. So these are kind of nice because that exclusion element can sometimes be hard to prove. So it is unlawful for an industry member to sell, offer for sale, or contract to sell to a trade buyer. So that's either a wholesaler or a retailer, or for the trade buyer to purchase or offer to purchase or contract to purchase alcohol beverages on consignment, under conditional sales, with privilege of return on any basis other than a bona fide sale, or condition upon acquiring other products. So this is unique because both parties can get a citation. So both parties can get a trade practice violation. So the industry member and the trade buyer. Next slide. So consignment sales rules are different from other trade practices because remember, both parties can be violating this. There's no exclusive outlet. The consignment sale provision can apply to both, okay? The jurisdictional limits occurred or have an effect of interstate commerce, but again, does not require exclusion. Next slide. Trade practice violations, there could either be civil penalties or criminal penalties. So these are very serious violations to have. So if you have any questions or when in doubt, reach out to us at outreach@ttb.gov and we can tell you if something you're doing or someone asked you to do something could potentially violate our trade practice provisions. Again, we have our trade practice resources. We have 5 really amazing videos on our website that you can watch. It goes over the FAA Act history and background. Then it goes over each one of the 4 trade practices in detail. You can also write me at tradepractices@ttb.gov. I also put my work email in the chat.
So just quickly to wrap up, if there is a crossover beverage product that is a beer but not a malt beverage, or if it is a wine that is not 7% alcohol by volume, it is not going to be subject to any of these federal tools that we have in our tool belt of regulating crossover products, except for the formula requirements. So again, if you are seeing a beverage, maybe if you look in our online certificate of label database, the COLA database, if there is a product out there and you don't see the COLA, that is most likely because it is not a product that is subject to the FAA Act. It might be a beer that is not a malt beverage, or it might be a wine under 7% alcohol by volume. And I will also just end by noting that our tools are limited. So we really rely on our state counterparts to use their tools that they have for regulating these beverages. And again, with the end goal of being, we want everybody to have as many options as they can to be able to get the products they want, but to be able to do it in a safe and regulated manner. And with that, I will just encourage you to sign up for the TTB newsletter. This is where we share our news, anything that's going on, any rulemakings, compliance tips, trends, anything that you might want to know about is in the newsletter. We work on putting it out weekly, so it comes out every Friday. And you can sign up with the subscribe to TTB newsletter. And a couple of things that we've had in there recently are that we extended the comment period for the allergen and alcohol facts rulemaking. So the comment period on that notice of proposed rulemaking now ends on August 15th. We've talked about our permit modernization project, where we are phasing out permits online, and we will be replacing it with My TTB permits. That will be coming to you, rolling out beginning this year, extending into next year. And then also our tax simplification program, where we are working to undergo pilots to merge our operational reports and our tax returns for the commodities to make things easier, simpler, faster. We currently have a beer pilot that is open. If you are a brewery, if you know a brewery that would like to participate in that, you would file those new draft pilot forms instead of your current operational reports and tax returns. So it's a pretty cool pilot. And then we also have a survey out on wine, distilled spirits to come. So I think that's it with my hot topics. Thank you again all so much. And thank you for the 5 minutes of bonus time. We definitely appreciate it. And again, if you have questions, outreach at ttb.gov, or Aniko and I are just first name dot last name at ttb.gov.
And our
Awesome.
survey, if you would take our survey, we'd really appreciate it, and let us know how we did today, or if you learned anything new, or if hopefully we can see you guys in person soon. I could talk forever, so if you have any questions, give me a call. And like I said, if you could fill out our survey, we'd really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Maggie, for having us.
Oh, you guys are welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you to those who have hung on. I just have a closing script that says thank you to Janelle and Aniko for your time and for sharing your valuable knowledge with us. We thank you for joining NABCA and TTB for this presentation. And so remember, if you've got any questions or follow-up questions, send them to outreach at ttb.gov. I also like to encourage you to visit the NABCA.org website for various resources, including white papers, previous webinars, and other materials. And in addition to the TTB survey, NABCA will also be sending you a survey to get your feedback about this presentation. So we really hope you would be able to fill it out. It is our goal to give you the education and the tools you need to perform your functions effectively. And with that said, our webinar is concluded. Thank you all so much. Thank you, ladies, for being here. Everyone have an awesome day.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.